Welcome and thank you for joining us. Today's presentation, we will provide an overview of the proposal and review process for requesting an allocation of technology resources available via the United States NAIRR Pilot Program. My name is Tim Middlecoop and I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren Michael.
We are co-principal investigators on a National Science Foundation grant awarded to Internet2 in partnership with the Campus Research Computing Consortium of research computing and data professionals. Through this grant, we are supporting NAIRR Pilot communications and user facilitation activities by leveraging CaRCC's network of these professionals who support educators and researchers across the country. Internet2 is a nonprofit .edu that operates the National Research and Education Network backbone and supports related collaboration technologies and communities like CaRCC and its partners. While today's content does not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation or other partners of the NAIRR Pilot, we have received significant review and input to the content of this presentation from NSF officials and from others executing the proposal, allocation, and user facilitation components of the NAIRR Pilot program. Today, we will briefly introduce the types of computing and data resources available through the NAIRR Pilot and discuss more deeply the requirements for proposers seeking access to allocations of these resources for teaching and open science research activities. The majority of the presentation will then focus on guidance for proposing access to NAIRR Pilot resources, with descriptions of the review and allocation process, specific proposal instructions and review criteria, and common reasons for rejection that proposers can avoid by clearly addressing these criteria. A lack of detail in resource calculations has been the most common reason for rejection, and so we'll spend a fair amount of time discussing appropriate resource estimates in the latter portion of this presentation. Throughout the presentation, language will appear in italics when it has been taken directly from the call for proposals or elsewhere on the NAIRR Pilot website. And for those less familiar with the NAIRR Pilot program and its overall objectives, we recommend consulting the resources linked on the pages linked here, which describe the full scope of agencies, other partners, allocable resources, and available funding. Information that we'll reference for proposing allocable NAIRR Pilot resources can be found on the designated NAIRR Pilot portal at nairrpilot.org. One thing to remember is that the NAIRR Pilot is a pilot and not yet a fully funded program. And as such, some processes and associated programs continue to grow and improve. The NAIRR Pilot welcomes you to apply for a resource allocation for your AI-related research and education projects. Some examples of use cases for NAIRR Pilot resources include delivering hands-on AI courses or workshops for teaching high school students to apply pre-trained AI models to data with notebooks, or developing a new foundational model using large-scale medical imaging data sets, or even applying AI to a variety of domains like monitoring wildlife. There are a large range of potential applications, resource needs, and technologies available. Computing capacity, models, tools, and data resources allocable via the NAIRR Pilot are listed on the web pages for AI-relevant researcher projects and for AI-relevant classroom/educator activities. You can also review a recording of a presentation from the inaugural NAIRR Pilot annual meeting held earlier in February of this year. Those interested in proposing allocations of resources should check the portal for new or changing opportunities and details beyond what is covered in that presentation and in today's presentation on requesting resources. The availability of resources may change due to demand or as additional resources come available in the pilot. The Research Resources page, call page, contains some information for proposers that applies across both calls. And then each call page additionally lists relevant resources with filters for viewing specific types of resources within these. For example, you can select to see only resources with GPUs available to the NAIRR Pilot. Each provider can be expanded to display details about the various resources they have available, with some providers providing multiple resources associated with the different filters. There will also be important information relevant to proposers' specification of resource quantities, and in a few cases, resource-specific requirements for proposers beyond the general requirements of the NAIRR Pilot program. Proposers must align with resource-specific requirements, so make sure to look at these in more detail. Importantly, NAIRR Pilot awards are for access to a proposed amount of technology resources and do not provide funding that can be used to purchase materials or cover effort. While some commercial resources are estimated in units of US dollars rather than units of technology to be consumed, awardees are only granted access to the equivalent amount of technology resources and are not granted a dollar amount for these resources. You'll also see that the classroom/educator resources call contains important information and requirements. The page has a similar tool that lists resources available for courses. Importantly, the available resources and the information and requirements for them will differ versus the researcher call. At this time, proposals for allocations of these resources are accepted at any time with a soft deadline on the 15th of the month ahead of the monthly review process. Research proposals should be submitted if and when a project is ready to immediately take advantage of the requested resources upon favorable review and notification, according to the timeline described on the slide. Classroom educator proposals will need to list a specific start date for the course described. Proposals are peer-reviewed approximately monthly by a recruited set of peer reviewers from the AI research, education, and computing communities. Selected proposals are then matched and perhaps adjusted or declined by a matching committee based upon preference or resource availability. Adjustments may be made if the proposed scale of resources is not well justified. Awardees can expect to be notified within 3 months of submitting, with turnaround times varying mostly with the number of proposals received for that month. As indicated earlier, the NAIRR Pilot classroom/educator call has some specific requirements on its page. And even though there are separate research and classroom/educator resources calls, there are a number of common requirements. The principal investigator, lead instructor, and/or all other users or learners must be from an eligible organization physically based in the United States, though this does not mean that these individuals need to be US citizens. Award details and abstracts will be published on the NAIRR Pilot website for all projects. Any relevant pre-existing grant funding should be described in the proposals, and activities without prior merit review are subject to additional scientific and pedagogical review. Please note that there are general requirements at the top of the Researcher Resources Call page that also apply to the Classroom/Educator Resources Call, but separate proposal preparation instructions for each of these and some other requirements for each call, as we'll discuss next. So we'll start by discussing proposal instructions that are specific to the Classroom/Educator call. As indicated earlier, the NAIRR Pilot Classroom/Educator Resources call is open to US-based undergraduate and graduate courses and short-form training sessions for other groups of learners. And all instructors and learners must be physically based in the US. Instructors are invited to a NAIRR Pilot chat channel and expected to provide an exit interview with feedback to improve the NAIRR Classroom/Educator Pilot. Proposal instructions are included in the Classroom/Educator Resources call page, including a proposal document and other supporting documents that are uploaded as proposers complete a summarizing web form via the NAIRR Pilot website. The 3-page project description must follow a prescribed outline to address specific review criteria, with references and other supporting documents counted separately. There are specific document formatting requirements available via the call webpage. Submissions must be associated with the proposer's institutional email address, so not something like Gmail. The review criteria for Classroom/Educator proposal submissions is as follows. The proposal must demonstrate alignment with the educational and workforce development focus, and it must demonstrate that the course is ready to teach. So the course syllabus should be ready to go with a specified start date, and instructors should have tested a majority of the course content on similar systems and with other individuals, such as TAs or in other classes. There is an expectation that resource providers are not the primary source of technical support for learners, such that proposals should address how instructors will support learners. Prior experience teaching previous classes with similar content or uses of technology is a plus for demonstrating readiness. Critically, and given that this is a request for technology resources, The proposal must match the resources offered and align with the resource-specific guidance on how to request them. This slide shows a hypothetical example based upon a real excerpt of the resource justification from a classroom/educator proposal. Please take a moment to read it and note the details that are included. You'll see that the proposers are requesting both AI notebooks and computing capacity, with each expressed in different resource-specific service units and with clear multiplication per the number of learners and hours of use. The proposers also requested support to integrate the GPU resources, which is an applicable form of support to request, so that the instructor is prepared to directly support all learners once the course starts. Also note how specific the numbers are, that the calculations are obvious, and that they are placed in a table for clarity. This makes it easy to see what is being requested. Instructors may also wish to request access a few months before the class starts to account for preparation time. Let's switch now to proposal requirements and guidance specific to the NAIRR Pilot Research Resources call, which is a little bit more extensive. For complete eligibility and requirements, please refer to the NAIRR Pilot website. Highlighting some of these requirements, research projects must be open and actively shared with the community, research project results must be open and actively shared with the community. Use of the proposed resources must be completed within 12 months, even if in the context of a larger or longer project. Again, this is a request for resources, not a proposal to do research. So it's acceptable and better to split complex or larger research projects across multiple separate resource requests. Projects are required to complete regular progress reports and a final report. Please see the URL listed here for more details. Additionally, research proposals should align with the NAIRR Pilot cross-cutting focus areas or the domain-specific focus areas. Otherwise, projects in other areas of AI research and applications may secondarily be considered for allocation. While we will not read all of these, you can refer to the website when preparing your proposal, and it's a benefit to list these explicitly. One way to assess alignment to the focus areas is to look at awarded abstracts on the resource awards page. Here you can also find information about the size and specific resources awarded. Looking now at the proposal submission process and instructions, first off, it's very important to read and follow the call for proposals on the website. Secondly, it's important to recognize that a NAIRR Pilot resource request is not a research proposal, as I mentioned before, but a request for computational and data resources. So the structure and review criteria for proposals may be new to you. And this has two implications. The first is that you must demonstrate that you are ready to immediately use the requested resources, just as for the education and classroom call. The second is that it should fundamentally change how you write the proposal. Along these lines, it is also important to note that proposals not supported by a merit review grant are subject to additional scientific review. For this reason, you need to include related grant funding information with the submission, though projects do not have to have prior funding. Only when you think you are ready and would be able to use resources following the review process, then prepare your proposal. Review eligibility requirements, prepare documents that meet review criteria, which we will cover next, and finally, submit it via the NAIRR Pilot website. At a later date, you can request a supplement to the award to add new or more resources, or request more time. The product description outline requirements can be broken down into 4 parts. Part A covers the scientific or technical goals and should be friendly for a general audience, not written for domain experts. Avoid complex technical words and do not use unexplained acronyms. All this should take up to about a page, perhaps more, if your project has not already been peer-reviewed. If proposals include multiple projects, aims, or phases in the same proposal, it is important that the requirements and review criteria are covered for all of them within the 3 pages. This includes detailed calculations of resource estimates for each type of resource need. Thus, proposers may wish to submit separate proposals, timed appropriately for different projects, aims, or sequential phases. Part B covers the compute, storage, and other resource estimates and justification, which we'll cover in a bit more detail later. These must align with the scientific and technical goals in Part A. Part C details any support needs. In addition, any restrictions on code, data, or access should be noted here as they may impact how the resources can be used. And finally, Part D covers the team and team preparedness. Among other things, this is where you cover the team's experience with similar systems and scales. And if others are going to be doing important work, their role and background needs to be covered in this section. One thing is worth repeating: read and follow the instructions carefully, and your proposal will cover everything you need to. I'm now going to go over the details of the review criteria for the research call. The proposal is reviewed according to the following criteria: alignment with focus areas, technical feasibility, project readiness, resource needs, resource estimates and justification, and team knowledge and experience. So you can hopefully see how these correlate with the key areas of the proposal on the previous slide.
Thank you, Lauren. With regard to program alignment, reviewers will be asking whether your proposed work requires resources like those available via the NAIRR Pilot that are not otherwise available to the proposer. Be sure to address this criteria by articulating the alignment with the specific NAIRR focus areas and by describing why you are pursuing resources available via the NAIRR Pilot. Feasibility. Is this an appropriate approach? Demonstrate the scientific and methodological feasibility. What methods are you using? Do you have some initial results? What other similar work is there? Demonstrate data feasibility. Do you have the data? Do you have access to the data? Is it ready to use? Is it regulated data? Demonstrate computational feasibility. Does it work on a subset or a reduced model? Will it run on the requested resources? Will it scale? Project readiness. Is this the appropriate time? Project and team members should be ready as they can be to use the requested resources. Any background research, development, testing, and optimization that does not require the resources should be completed and described as such. This should be relative to the described project phases, timelines, and scope of work, and should demonstrate that the product is ready to use the requested resources. This is especially important for data, which should be ready to be used, and have any relevant data use agreements in place. The proposal must indicate any support needs relevant to the use of NAIRR Pilot resources. Prior use of a resource provider and working with them, perhaps via their office hours, can go a long way to demonstrate readiness. Team experience. Is this the right team? The proposal should describe the appropriateness of the team given the prior experience with the methods, resources, and scale. Some resource providers have additional rules and requirements, which may include eligible organization affiliation and citizenship information. In this case, be sure to include the additional required information. Need for resources. Are these the right resources? There are a wide range of resources available via the NAIRR Pilot, and you should utilize and justify the ones most appropriate for the computation and for the team. It is best to take the time to evaluate a resource and request it specifically, which also helps demonstrate that you are ready to use the resources immediately. Be sure to compare and describe any performance differences as part of your proposal. Also consider the availability of resources. For example, 80 gigabyte A100 GPUs are a limited and heavy used resource. Do you really need an A100 with 80 gigabytes? If selecting no resource preference, choose for me, it may be useful only if you can clearly demonstrate how your computations perform on more than one resource or hardware type, or you know of multiple resources that have similar hardware systems. If you really don't know what you need, we strongly suggest attending the NAIRR Pilot or resource provider office hours to help you with selection and testing before you submit a proposal. You may also consider a small initial allocation to perform tests on one or more resources, which we'll touch on later. Resource estimate. Is this an appropriate amount of resources? You need to clearly articulate the amount of resources that you need based upon prior requirements and scaling information, perhaps from similar work. Include specific benchmark tests and/or citable data from others. Failing to do so is the most common reason for rejection or a significant reduction in allocated resources. For each methodologically linked project phase or category of AI-related computational tasks, how much computing time is needed on what resource type, for how many such computations, How much data storage is needed for inputs and generating outputs? The most compelling estimates are based upon benchmarking tests with smaller portions of data or computational work that can be scaled to predict the full resource needs. If you need help with benchmarking, the NAIRR Pilot has resources to help you. For clarity, proposals should summarize calculations via tables that capture benchmark values and relevant scaled-up calculations totaled across project tasks and phases. Be sure to use resource-relevant units, for example, GPU hours. And if a resource is allocated in some other units, be sure to include a conversion to those units, for example, service units or dollars. For some resources, mainly public commercial cloud, you are also required to include a link to the results of the resource pricing calculator. Be sure that this link works. Remember, this is a math problem. Show your work. You will be graded on your answer. So how do you get good estimates? You test. Testing has a lot of benefits beyond just the numbers. It also demonstrates the project readiness. Obviously, you may not have the resources to do a full test, but you can run it on a subset of the data, even though the results may not be scientifically meaningful. You may also be able to do testing that may be more scientifically meaningful on a reduced resolution or precision dataset. Remember, scaling is often nonlinear, and 2 data points is linear. However, one thing you should do is use similar hardware, such as GPU type and memory size, and environments. For example, don't assume that it is trivial to move from an HPC system to the cloud. For the cloud, there are changes beyond compute and storage that are hard to estimate. Testing is essential. One way to test is to use systems already available to you, or leverage startup and testing options available from many of the resource providers who offer such access for these exact purposes. Also in the works is a small NAIRR Pilot launch allocation to help you get started on a resource with a modest allocation. This will probably be a simple request on the order of a few paragraphs, not a full 3-page proposal. Stay tuned for details. Here are some other resources that you can use for testing. Most have no-cost startup or exploratory type allocations. If you have a graduate student or a postdoc, the Access Explore allocation is an excellent way of exploring Access resources. We'll wrap up this section with some common proposal pitfalls. To be honest, we're being blunt here, but they are based on our experience as reviewers, and we want to help you succeed. The number one pitfall is not including sufficient detail for the resource request calculations. The statement, "We estimate that we need 20 million GPU hours," by itself is not a sufficient justification for requesting millions of dollars worth of compute. One thing that may help you is to imagine that this is a question on your exam and that the students are asked to show your calculations. Another common pitfall is the failure to demonstrate that the team is ready to immediately use the resources. You should provide details that show that the team has experience with similar resources and scale. Yet another way of demonstrating that you're not ready is by saying that in the first 6 months, the project will be obtaining and preparing the data. Finally, another pitfall is to use the same language you would use in a research grant proposal. This will set your proposal in the wrong direction. This is a request for resources to complete a specific computation. We'll now go over some examples, some good, some not so good. The following examples are based upon actual proposals. The NAIRR Pilot website hopes to post full exemplar proposals soon. How would you rate this resource quantification? Take a second to read it. What is missing from this example? Even though this is a reasonable framework, it does not contain nearly enough information to justify the resource request. The hours and storage are not broken down. There are no calculations, nor a connection to the methods that they're going to use. This slide just repeats what I said. We are not going to attempt to fix this, but don't worry, we have some good examples coming up. Take a look at this example. What do you think? Is this a good resource quantification? Unfortunately, there are issues with this one as well. Upon initial inspection, there are lots of numbers, apparently from benchmarks. However, it is not clear how the benchmarks relate in scale or complexity to the proposed work, and the benchmark requirements are not connected to the total V and sum numbers of anticipated training and tuning computations. There needs to be some multiplication and addition, and the numbers need to actually add up to the total. Make it easy for the reviewer to see and check your math. Again, this slide just repeats what I said. The next example is a much better one. Now that you understand the importance of testing, we now present an example that was rated as excellent. Take a moment to read it. Note the detailed calculations as well as the clear testing. See how the table makes things clear? Finally, let's look at another one. Take a moment to read it. How is this one different? What do you like? Take the number. As you can see, it is easy to follow how the resource request was arrived at. Take the number of unique monthly users, test how many tokens are required per user per month, and then compute the total number of tokens required for this project and convert it into dollars. In this case, if you do the math, it ends up being 15 input tokens and 75 output tokens per unique user, which sounds reasonable. As you can see, this gives people a lot of insight into what is being done. If I were to improve this request further, I would spell out the token consumption per user in the calculations and add a summary table at the end to show this information. Also note, they specifically indicate GPT 4.0. In some scenarios, specific choices may have an impact on resource consumption rates. Also note the consistent use of units. Without units, it's just a number. And remember, show your work. So what did we learn today? This is a resource request proposal, not a research or course proposal. Adjust appropriately. Demonstrate that you are immediately able to start using the resources. Read and follow the instructions. Provide detailed justifications and calculations for your resource request. Show your work. Ask for help and leverage office hours.